All right, to all who are new here, my name is Dr. Michelle Henney, and I'd like to welcome you to Releve Sports Medicine's Virtual Journal Club. For additional webinar educational opportunities, you can visit our website and register directly for the webinar or sign up for the email list to be notified of upcoming webinars. We are continuing to update our schedule, so check back often. The video will be available for review after the Journal Club. The information contained in the video content represents the views and opinions of the presenters and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Releve Sports Medicine. The mere appearance of video content on the website does not constitute an endorsement by RSM or its affiliates of such video content. The video content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The video content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have read or seen on the site. RSM hereby disclaims any and all liability to any party for any direct, indirect, implied, punitive, special, incidental, or other consequential damages arising directly or indirectly from any use of the video content which is provided as is and without warranties. For all athletic trainers who are intending to get live CEUs from the BOC, you will receive an email 1 hour after the webinar concludes, which includes a link to the combined quiz, evaluation, and assessment. You will have up to 72 hours to complete the quiz and the evaluation. This email will come from customercare@gotowebinar.com. Please ensure that this is done to receive your statement of credit. If you don't receive the follow-up email or you have any other concerns, then contact us via our email at journalclub@relevesportsmedicine.com. Once the statement of credit is available for download from our website, you will receive an email notification. If you have any questions during the webinar, please submit the questions and we will review questions at the conclusion of the presentation. If you cannot see the PowerPoint slides and you're accessing the webinar from your mobile phone, swipe the screen to the left or to the right and the slides will become visible. The recording will be available for review from our website tomorrow. All right, I'm so excited to introduce to everybody today Dr. Saundra Holseth. She is a doctor of osteopathy. And she has joined us here at Releve Sports Medicine. That was back in February, so she is just doing fabulous here in Winter Haven, Florida. And she is also moving to our area, gonna be having a house here in Polk County as well. So in her role, she serves as a primary care non-surgical sports medicine specialist. Dr. Holseth provides a range of care services that includes ultrasound guided injections, acute and chronic management of musculoskeletal injuries and conditions, along with using osteopathic manipulative medicine to treat musculoskeletal ailments. Dr. Holseth received her degree from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine and completed her residency at Larkin Community Hospital. Additionally, she underwent a fellowship in sports medicine at NOVA Southeastern University. She holds dual board certifications in family medicine and neuromuscular medicine, along with a specialty certificate of added qualification in sports medicine. So many degrees. Dr. Holseth is an ICR World Rugby certified physician that enjoys covering all levels of rugby events. Outside of her professional life, Dr. Holseth enjoys outdoor activities such as fishing, kayaking, and camping, and she will be presenting today on an introduction to rugby.
All right, are you able to hear me, Michelle?
I can hear you, and let me get this. So you should have a little button pop up to be able to share your screen, and then we can see your PowerPoint slides. Okay, Michelle Barber, I will connect and figure out what's going on your email.
So are you able to see my screen, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then how do I make this little box go? I think it's that.
The little orange arrow.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that wonderful welcome. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about a sport I love. I found rugby in college, actually had no idea what it was before that. And it is a wonderful, beautiful, complicated sport that is growing worldwide, even more so than it already was, but especially here in the United States. And so this will be just some general knowledge, general information about it. I can tell you I played the sport for about 3 years before it finally clicked in my brain what was happening on the field. It is an ever dynamic, fast-paced, full contact sport. So I have no disclosures. These are actually 2 of the teams I played with. The yellow and green is Savannah. when I was living in the South going to graduate school, and the mush pesh of people and jerseys you see in the blue are my college team. That was actually one of our alumni events, which we host every year, and it's so much fun. So today we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the history of rugby, some epidemiology facts, the equipment that's utilized, common terms that you're going to hear in rugby. What are the positions? We'll go over those, some of the basic rules of play, and give you a little bit of understanding of those. Kind of just touch on some sport-specific injuries and discuss injury prevention. And then what is the World Rugby protocol, specifically for concussion? However, they do have protocols for everything. And so back in 1823, William Webb Ellis was playing soccer at the rugby school in Warwickshire, England, and decided he was going to screw the rules, picked up the ball, and ran it to the goal. This is what we now know in history to be rugby. This is how it came to be. He is considered the founder and the father of rugby. However, there are showings in history that the Romans played a very similar game. There is history in the Mayan world as well that has a game similar. England is one of the primary and was where it all began. And so they continued to have that sport grow throughout university and schools. In 1871, England played Scotland in the first ever international rugby match. And this was at the time when the formation of the rugby union was created. Rugby continued to spread, and an international rugby board was established that oversaw the rules and regulations of the game. Nowadays, in our modern age, it is known as World Rugby. This did spread throughout the English colonies and the countries that England had ties with throughout the world. And so you'll see, if you look at, where is rugby big and primarily played, obviously the islands of Ireland, England, that has your Scotland, Wales as well. Italy is another big location. France as their rivals was another one. Then we get down to South Africa and New Zealand and Australia. And that is where it has primarily been a fixture. However, from there, it has spread like wildfire. And so in 1895, there was a splitting when it came to the organization of how games were regulated and who played who. And basically, it started with the North Rugby Football Union and the Rugby Football Union being created as the two major groups. This was back in 1895. In 1922, the RFU remained, and that NRFU became Rugby League. Rugby League is what ended up actually spreading more internationally. And so when we hear of international matches, that's usually what they're played under. Fun fact is that 15s actually used to be a part of the Olympics from 1900 to 1924, and then it was dropped after that. However, in 2016, Rugby Sevens was introduced into the Olympics and has been a staple in the Summer Olympics since then. At current time, the US team is actually the reigning 15s Olympic champion. And now that we're in 2025, we have been the Olympic champions for 100 years. So kind of a funny little fact there. So this is William Webb Ellis. This is his statue that is outside of the rugby school in Warwickshire, England. And Rugby World Cup is one of the largest sporting events in the world. We actually just finished with the Women's World Cup. Congrats to England for winning that. It was a major, major successful tournament for women's rugby. But the goal of that is to get this big, beautiful gold cup, the Webb Ellis Cup. And so the men have theirs, the women have ours, which England will now hold for the next 4 years. So rugby is a sport that is played by both men and women and of all ages. And in youth, it's more like flag football right now, but it is still full tackle. They're just restricted on how they can tackle. If you ever want to take a look at it, it's absolutely adorable to watch the kids out there. It is a sport that involves enhancing moderate to vigorous physical activity, and it's a wide range of not only physical, but mental and social benefits. One of the things I loved about playing in college was I had the physicality of a sport that we trained a couple times a week, both weight training, on the field, but we also had the social benefits. So after every match, afterwards, both teams met up and it would be a big rugby party. Sometimes it's on the field, sometimes it's after, but it was the camaraderie. You left everything on the pitch. And that was one of the biggest things I learned in that sport was it didn't matter how much you beat the crap out of each other on the field. It didn't matter if somebody tackled you the best you've ever seen in your life. At the end of the day, you cheersed and said, what a good game, and went on like nothing happened. And it was just so much fun. Rugby is a full contact sport. You are constantly fighting for possession of the ball during contact, when you're running, when it's kicked, or when it's thrown. It is the largest single sporting event in the world, and it encompasses the Olympic Sevens, Six Nations, and World Cup tournaments as their largest tournaments. Now, the U.S. has been growing a U.S. Sevens tournament over the last few years that is also gaining great momentum. So if we start looking in what's important to you guys as the ATCs or providers on the sidelines is, where are the injuries? What do they encompass? What are we watching for? So more than half of rugby injuries are usually soft tissue injuries. This is going to include your ligaments and tendons, sometimes open wounds, bruises, and hematomas, followed thereafter by fractures and dislocations and concussion. Most are to the lower extremities, followed by the head, spine, and upper limb and torso. The rate of head and spine injuries has actually decreased in the recent decade due to rule changes. And one of those rule changes is how the scrum is operated, which we will talk about a little bit later. But the other thing that has changed is the rules on tackling and actually the penalties that are doled out for improper tackling, and we will get into that as well later. So most injuries occur in contact with another player, which makes sense considering that this is a full contact sport, and they're primarily encountered during tackling. But we do have other contacts, which is mauls, rucks, and scrums that can lead to injuries as well. More of the contact injuries are seen in the forwards, and as I describe what a forward is coming up, you'll understand a little bit more. There tend to be the ones that do more of the contact in sport and hitting. The hooker and fly half, two of the positions on the field, the hooker being a forward, the fly half being a back, they tend to have the highest injury rates of any other players on the pitch. And when I go over the positions, that'll come to light of why, period. The fast play and increased does lead to an increase in frequency of injury. And so these games can become very, very quick when we have breakout runs. And that's when tackling becomes key, and that's when we can see those injuries occur. Sevens is an even faster paced game than 15s. And so you can get a higher increase in injuries in those games. So this is a sport that we say no pads, very minimal equipment. We don't wear helmets in there, but as you can see on the screen, there is a soft padded headgear that can be worn. And it's literally just like foam and fabric. This is mostly worn to decrease the likelihood of getting an abrasion to the head or having the ears get caught with tackling or scrumming and rucking to kind of protect from getting that cauliflower ear or if there is an injury to it. I can't tell you, I tried to wear one of these one time. They do decrease your ability to hear on the field with some of the brands, but I also just felt like it was impeding my ability to move. It's a very odd feeling on the head. The other thing that we wear is mouth guards. Now, mouth guards this year at the Rugby World Cup, and that will continue with the Olympics and the Men's World Cup coming up in a few years, is a sensor that was placed into the mouth guard. They're all fitted to each individual athlete, and they're recorded with that athlete's movements. What they're watching for is that high impact acceleration, deceleration, how many hits they're taking in a game. And it's helping us gauge and safeguard against concussions better. So I'm actually really looking forward to the information that's going to come out from this tournament. This was the first world tournament that these were used in. And so it'll be interesting to see what those results showed. Now on the pitch, just like with soccer or football, even baseball, we wear studs or cleats. These can be plastic tipped, but they can also be metal. And I've got a picture here. These are actually my old cleats, and they are metal studs. I did have plastic tipped cleats as well. And usually I would switch them out based on what type of field I was playing in. If the field was muddy, really, really wet, very, very soft, the metal studs gave me better purchase on the ground, better grip, better push off. And so I tended to wear those then. And that's what most ruggers will wear them for. They're great in the forward pack too, especially when I need to have a lot of strength to push off in the scrum. The plastic tip cleats are better when the field is turf, which was rare for us to play on, or it's a drier field, then those are sufficient. The uniform is pretty simple: shorts, jerseys, and knee-length socks. Back in my day in college, we actually had the heavy knit long sleeve jersey. That's the traditional, original rugby style jersey. Had the collar on it. Over the years, and if you watch any rugby now, they have gone to the fitted, breathable shorts and jersey style. They're a little bit more easily movable in, but they don't give you anything to grab onto. And so we are seeing a decrease in the incidences of our jersey fingers or mallet and swan neck deformities that can occur when our hands get stuck in the fabric. And then we have the rugby ball. And the rugby ball itself is similar to how a football is, and almost if you had a soccer ball that was deflated. It actually came from being a slightly deflated soccer ball, but it is larger than the football, but not as pointy. And the size of the rugby ball is actually made to allow the type of throwing that you need for it. So moving on to the pitch. So same size as a football field. We have a lot of different lines here. We'll go over some of them. So we do have the midway or the half line. That is where kickoffs are performed and restarts of the game at halftime. Out from that is the 10-meter line. When a kickoff is made, the ball actually has to travel past that 10-meter line to be played, or it can end up in a scrum. The teams have to stay, if they're receiving the ball, behind that 10-meter line until the ball is played. And your team, as the kicking team, will be lined up behind the kicker on that halfway line to charge the ball and begin play. The 22-meter line is a good line that we utilize for penalty. If a penalty occurs in there, sometimes you can have a 22-meter drop or a 22-meter kick that can occur. And then we have the goal line. And the goal line is important because that's what you have to get behind to actually score, but you cannot go beyond the length of the field or it's a dead ball. Up from the goal line is a 5-meter line. And we use that 5-meter line for scrums. If there is a restart due to penalty or a play has to be called up, like a maul went to ground, and we're resetting that play, they'll call a 5-meter scrum. And so you do back away 5 meters, and it's just to give advantage to the defense in protecting their line. We do have a 5-meter from the touch line on the side. Now, when the ball goes out of bounds on the touch line, a line out is called, and they line up 5 meters out from that line, and the ball gets thrown into them. We do have posts just like in football, and those are utilized for conversions, penalty kicks, and drop kicks. Now you'll notice here that I put that this is called the pitch. It is not a rugby field, but known as a pitch. And so you'll hear that distinctive term in this sport. So some common terms, I've just kind of mentioned most of these, but a try is how we score. That is our score. It is 5 points. When you do a conversion, it is the kick afterwards. And so that kick afterwards is worth 2 points. Now, when a try is scored, I'm going to go back to the pitch field. Say a try is scored and it is 5 meters from the touchline inside that goal area. Right where the ball is touched, it can be backed up straight from there to kick for the conversion. Unlike in football in America, where they kind of lined it up pretty much straight on, doesn't matter where the player ran into the line. Here, the challenge is that wherever that ball gets touched down, the kicker has to back up straight from there. Now, they can back up as far as they want, to get whatever angle they need. So a lot of times in rugby, especially if they have the opportunity where they have open field, you'll see them run in and they'll be into that goal area, but they'll go behind the posts to give their team the best opportunity to score that conversion. So that try line, you have to get behind that try line, but it's not as simple as just getting behind it. Like in football, that ball just has to cross that line. Yes, the ball has to cross that line. However, the ball has to also be controlled and touched down with no impediment to the ground to count as a try. Now, a penalty can occur for many reasons. A high tackle, it can be from having too many knocks forward, it can be for dirty play in the scrum, the line out, or while on the field. Penalties can be doled out by the other team getting a control of a scrum. They can get a free kick, or they can even get a penalty try if the infraction was caused right on the goal line. So a ruck itself is where the ball is on the ground after a tackle and your player has placed it towards their team. Players have come over them, and I do have a picture of this next, to create this ruck. And so as you see, the player that had the ball is underneath on the bottom. He's putting the ball towards his team, and players from both teams are coming together shoulder to shoulder to try to drive each other back to get that ball. You do have to come in straight from behind the player that is engaged already. And the very last back person will be the one to pick the ball up and throw it out. A maul is where the ball gets held up and a minimum of 3 players, at least one from each team, are moving the ball in a direction down line on the field, but they're still standing up. Now, these can become very, very dangerous if they go to ground. And so if the ball goes to ground or the player that has control of the ball goes to ground, it is usually blown up. You cannot form a ruck from a maul. The other thing with the maul is it's not as simple as just trying to keep the ball in the middle and drive forward. Usually you're trying to work its way back to your furthest back player to protect it and keep it within control of your team, but also make it easier to be able to throw it out to that back line. So a line out is a reset of play when the ball has gone out to the side. And both teams will line up next to each other and a lift is performed. Now the numbers have to match on both sides. There's a tunnel between the two, and once the ref says set, the person throwing the ball in, who's usually the hooker, can then throw the ball in, but they have to throw it straight down the tunnel. So the 2 people that are lifted into the air are actually fighting in the air for this ball. They are, however, only allowed to grab it 2 hands or utilize their inside hand to hit the ball to their teammates on the ground. You have to trust the people that are lifting you because they can't just drop you midair if the ball doesn't win to your side. So the scrum is another way to reset. It's 8 on 8, getting down into a crouched position and coming together and driving against each other while the ball is put in to try to win control of it. And then we have the sin bin, and the sin bin is very similar to with hockey rules, where if a penalty is called on a player multiple times, they can get a yellow card. And with a yellow card, it is in 15s, a 10-minute sin bin. With 7s, it's a 2-minute sin bin. And these are usually for repeated infringements or dangerous play. Usually we get a warning or two beforehand. Sometimes the ref will be cool and actually like pull your captain aside, have a chat, or even pull you aside if you're doing something wrong. Sin bins, however, leave your team down a player. If you get a red card, you are out and your team plays down for the rest, just very similar to soccer. So again, that ruck is formed. Key things on this, in rugby, you are considered grass if you are on the ground. So it is in your best interest to get out of that ruck and move and get back on your feet as quickly as possible. Sometimes that's not always possible, so you may get cleated. But the players that are standing are not allowed to forcefully, actively cleat you. That would be a penalty. So now we get into these positions, as you've heard me calling out fly halves and scrummies and props and hookers. So the biggest difference between 15s and 7s is 15 players per side, 7 players per side, but also 15s is a longer game than 7s is. So in 7s, we're going to have a prop, a hooker, and a prop. Those are our forwards. They're going to be the ones to scrum. They tend to be the people that make the biggest hits and do the most tackling. Then we have the scrum half. They are the one that's going to get the ball out when it's been on the ground at the back end of a ruck or the back end of a scrum. Then we have the fly half. And in all reality, there's debate between scrum half or fly half being kind of like our quarterbacks on the field. The fly half does tend to call out the plays, and then the scrum half helps to execute it. In 7s, we'll have a single center and then a single wing. The field is the exact same size with the same markings as it is for 15s. When you get over into 15s rugby, we still have our prop, hooker, and prop, and they are at the front of our scrum. They will be supported and driven by 2 locks or second rows. And on the outside of each of those second rows, we have a flanker. We have a blind side flanker and an open side flanker. And basically that means that one is on the side with the backs, one is on the other. Now those 2 won't switch sides of the scrum usually, but their blind and open side does, pending where the backs are behind them. And at the very end of the scrum is the 8-man. They're the ones that, as the ball is being put into the tunnel formed by the props and the hookers, and the hooker hooks the ball back, the ball is trying to get back to that 8-man so that the scrum half can get it out and back into play. Now, when we get to the backs of 15s, we again have our scrum half, we have our fly half, and then we've added an inside center and an outside center. So now instead of 1 center, we've got 2, and they have the same job. Get that ball, run it forward, make crosses, make plays, have passing. With 15s, we have a wing on the left side and a wing on the right side. Now, these 2 usually do not change sides of the field. The left wing is usually always the left and the right the right. However, sometimes they do drop back into support and will end up on the opposite side of the field. The big change will be if the back line lines up to the right, then the right wing is involved. If the back line lines up to the left wing gets involved. And the fullback is our deep man. They are the ones that stay back for any balls that get kicked. They're going to be usually the ones that have a great foot for kicking and be the ones to be kicking it forward, but then have to have super speed to sprint forward to keep their team on side. So we've kind of already covered some of these rules as we've been going through this, and there are a ton, and it's very confusing. So here's just some basic ones. Rugby is continuous unless the ball goes out of bounds or a try is scored, and then play is reset, whether it be a line out or kicking off. 15s is 2 40-minute halves. There is no stoppage time in this, just like with soccer, we keep playing. The only true stoppage time is if there's an injury. Time can be added on for any injury play as seen fit by the ref. Rugby sevens is 2 7-minute halves with 7 players per side. Again, this is just a faster paced game, and time can be added on if there's any injuries. There's not really an offense or defense as we see in American football. You're on offense if you have the ball, defense if you don't. You're always trying to get on offense and control the field. When you get into that try zone, to actually score, you have to controllably put the ball down on the ground with direct contact. It's not as simple as just spiking the ball down or dropping it down. You still have to be holding that ball while it makes contact with the ground. It can be held up. So if an opposing team gets any body part underneath that ball, or another player is able to kick it away before you can actually have contact, then it's called held up. Gets brought back out to that 5-meter line and a scrum is held. When we throw the ball can only go backwards or sideways. We're not allowed to throw it forward at all. The only way that the ball moves forward is by running with it, or if it is kicked. And that control has to be with the kick. It can't be a fumble or like you're dribbling in soccer, even though there have been some plays that have allowed a controlled soccer-like kick down the field. To kick off, you actually have to do a drop kick. So you drop the ball, it bounces off the ground, and then you make that kick. And as I mentioned earlier, it must go at least 10 meters to be played, and the other team must touch it first. If not, it can be brought back for either a redo or a scrum. So when we line up to take a kick, this picture on the left, looking at the screen, we see that the All Blacks here have the ball. Their kicker is in the front getting ready to drop it to kick it off, and all of his teammates are last foot, as we call it. So they are equal with his posterior foot, and they will remain behind him until he moves forward physically into that 10-meter zone. The other team is spread out, and usually what it is that you have your forwards in an area and your backs in another, but they're taking up this entire space of the field from that 10 meter to the 22 meters. And then your fullback and wings are deep to try to catch the ball just in case it goes to the outline. Here we see, this is what we call a drop kick. And so when we're going to do that start of the game, it does have to bounce and kick. But at any time during the game, you can, if you are within those posts and feel that you could make it at the benefit of your team, you can perform a drop kick. And at that point, if it goes through posts, it's 3 points. These, however, can be blocked by anybody on the field opposing you. And if they miss, it's still live play. The other team can get the ball. Again, here, if in the bottom picture where he's going to leap through the air to try to get this ball on the ground, he, as you can see, is trying to get his hands in control of it so that he can push it down. Now, if that ball gets touched down right in that corner, right on that outline, that kicker has to back it straight up from there to kick it in. The other thing is this can be called back to a 5-meter scrum if this ref deems that his body went over the line and was out of bounds. In rugby, there is no blocking or shielding. You have to make sure that if you're on your own team, you get out of your way if they're coming behind you. So you have to be very aware and mentally sharp on the field. If you do block or shield, it is a penalty against you and can cost your team to have to back up 10 yards. Any penalty that occurs that doesn't lead to a scrum, your team has to back up 10 yards. And if you don't, you can't play that ball until you actually do. Penalty kicks and drop kicks are worth 3 points each if they go through posts. If you pass a ball forward or you're not controlling it and it drops forward and goes forward by knocking on your body, it's called a knock on. And this is a turnover where the other team gets to control the ball by placing it into the scrum. If you do this intentionally and knock it forward, it can lead to a penalty for your team, but also a card for you if you continuously do it. If you happen to be the one to make a decision that you're going to kick the ball down the field and keep it in play, you better start booking it, because to keep your team on sides, you must reach wherever that ball ends up first. Anybody that's in front of you when that ball is kicked cannot play the play until you are there, or they're offsides and it's a penalty. When it comes to tackling, we don't just tackle anybody that we want anytime we want. You're only allowed to tackle the person that has the ball in hand. All right, so the beauty of the scrum. So here we've got Argentina and the All Blacks. This is what the scrum looks like from the top. We have our prop, hooker prop, followed by our second row supporting them and as the driving force of the scrum. Our flankers are attached on the outside, and then we have our 8-man coming through to drive it home and get that ball. Our scrum halves stand on the side, and when the ref gives the call, they're able to put that ball into the center where the hookers hook it back. These scrums do start out very low, and so when you see them right before, as they're getting into position, we are low to the ground, you are in a squat position. The flankers are usually on a knee along with the second row so that they can get up and go right into a driving force. But as these scrums last, as they keep driving, we do see that the natural pattern is to end up more on our feet. And this is where injuries can occur. All right. So, like we talked about with the ruck, you have to come in from behind. If you're not involved in the ruck, you have to stay last foot and stay outside of it. You're usually on defense or waiting for that ball to come to you. Again, if the maul goes to ground, it's stopped and a scrum is used. When a scrum is called, players do set up. So that's when our forward or our packies come up. They bind to each other on their own team and get into that position. The cadence is called by the ref. And once cadence is called, that scrum is set, they're going to engage for that ball to be put into play. Now, if the ref deems that they're too far away, they're too close, doesn't look good, they're going to blow it up and reset. Over the years, this cadence has changed, and there's a lot of debate on what's the best way for it, what's not a good way. Back when I played some 20 years ago, it was crouch, touch, bind, engage. And then it was crouch, touch, engage. Then it was crouch, bind, set. And so that is the current cadence that you will hear the ref call out. Now, what this means. So when the ref calls crouch, that is when everybody sinks. They get into that nice squat position. Everybody is nice and tight and secured to each other. And you lean towards and forward so that you can engage the other scrum. We're keeping our heads up in that front row. We're looking each other in the eye for that. The bind, we come together, and the props, all 4 of them, will reach across and they will grab on the back of the jersey or the arm of the prop across from them. And then the set. The set is when the actual 2 scrums fully come together and can start getting that ball into play and pushing against each other. If the scrum collapses at this point, the refs call it up, they'll reset, we try to go again. Sometimes, especially on a muddy pitch, or if the ground was soft, they'll move the scrum over a little bit. If scrums are unsuccessful multiple times, the teams are not getting it, the ref can penalize a team if they continuously are causing it to collapse, or they can actually make scrums uncontested, especially at the younger levels, where it can become dangerous if one scrum is much more powerful or causing collapses, and we want to try to prevent injuries. Tackling. So again, like I mentioned, you can only tackle the person with the ball, but over the years, tackling has led to a lot of injuries, and so there's new rules about it. 1, you can't pick anybody up like this, throw them over your shoulder, and carry them down the field. 2, we are not to dump tackle. We are not picking them up to drop them on their heads or their backs at all. You want to be controlled in your tackles, and so the rule of tackling is cheek to cheek. Tackles have to be below shoulder height, and ideally we call it the waist to upper knee and not the knee. There's no spear tackling. You have to wrap around the other player. Again, like I said, cheek to cheek. The tackler's cheek of their face to the tackled cheek's buttock. And so cheek to cheek. We're not to pick them up or dump tackle them. Once you've been tackled, you must place the ball and release. Sometimes the refs will even tell you 3 seconds or less. You've got to do this quick. If you hold on to the ball when you've gone down, it's a penalty against you. The same goes for the tackler, though. Once you've made the tackle and you're on the ground, you must release. Roll away once on the ground. You cannot play the ball. You cannot play the tackle. To play the ball after it's been tackled, you have to be on your feet, and that's usually why a ruck gets formed. Now, if it was a one-on-one tackle, that ball is out and you stand up, then you can play the ball and keep going. Or another player can come running through, pick that ball up and go. Stiff arms, however, are allowed, and this is just another incentive to be going low when you tackle, because no one wants to get stiff-armed and embarrassed by being thrown away. So here we have one of the most famous rugby players of our age right now, Miss Ileana Mar. She is stiff-arming one of the Australia players at World Cup this year. Let me tell you, I saw that game. It was beautiful, beautiful fight between the two teams, and that girl went flying. Now, had she come in low like you're supposed to, would not have happened. This top example here is a perfect example of trying to start and setting a ruck. We've got 2 players on the ground. The Aussie man here is got to release this tackle, release the ball. He's trying to play it on the ground. The New Zealander has got to place that ball on the ground and release it. And then the Aussie on top is starting to form that ruck. Here we have an example of one of the England players going to make a drop kick attempt. And one of the, I think that's Fiji, players going to block that ball. Now, let me tell you, there's force behind that. That ball is not soft. It hurts. But if it prevents 3 points from getting on the board, well worth it. This upper picture here is of, I think that's Scotland. Nope, that's Wales. And France. And that is what a maul looks like. So big man here in the middle was the one that initially brought that ball in, and he was able to get his body turned to put the ball back to his teammates. However, he is now that calling force. He is watching that while the other team is trying to get him from behind. But as you can see, they've formed a solid wall, and that ball is at that back man, ready for him to break off and run or pass it out. So some common rugby injuries that we tend to see pretty commonly are the concussions. And these have actually significantly decreased over the last few decades with the improved rules of tackling and scrum, but along with improved training standards and prevention. A lot of it has also come from recognition of possible injuries that could cause concussion, and so we are paying more attention to that. Sprains and strains, those kinds are obvious. You know, anytime you're out playing any sport, you can get these. And the most common locations for these are the knees and the shoulders in rugby players. Fractures usually are seen to the collarbone from getting a stiff arm or falling and onto the shoulders, and fingers from being tackled or stomped on. Dislocations are usually the shoulders and the fingers as well. And again, this is mostly from tackling or the scrum. And overuse injuries are common as well. Remember, these are tendinitises and stress fractures. So injury prevention. One of the biggest things we want to do is prevent anybody from getting hurt. We want them to be able to stay on the pitch, having fun, playing a game they love. So first off, we've got some strength and conditioning. Core stabilization is key in rugby. A lot of the game is played in that squat position with power coming from the back, the core, and the hips and pelvis to drive into a tackle, to drive through a scrum, to lift another player. Then there's our traditional functional strengthening. You know, we're getting in and out of the weight room. We are also working on our flexibility and mobility. We do not want to have hamstring or quad strains because we didn't stretch. And so those are all components of it, whether it be dynamic or static. Proper technique and training is key as well. Safe tackling. Again, that cheek-to-cheek body positioning is the ideal way to learn to tackle and then keep tackling. A lot of times, especially younger, we're teaching them to tackle by having them actually start on their knees with somebody walking by them and making a slow speed stationary tackle. From there, they go into a squat position, and then from there, they go into a standing squat position, and then you add in speed over time. I can tell you back in college when I was learning to tackle, that was exactly how we did it. We actually utilized the gymnastics mats as well once we started getting some speed for protection and against getting hurt as much as we could. You also do walking drills of rocks, mauls, and scrums. This picture here shows a sled machine or a scrum machine. And the people in the front row, our prop, hook, or prop, are going to put their heads in between these pads. Shoulders go right into them to drive. Other players will stand on here to add weight. This allows us to get practice driving without actually having to drive against each other. It also allows us to work on getting proper positioning for our own scrums and work on practicing getting low. Gradual skill progression is key, so learning to pass stationary and then adding in your running drills, then adding in your plays. Again, protective gear, sometimes that's soft shoulder pads, headgear, mouth guards, and cleats. We also want to make sure that athletes are warming up and cooling down correctly, utilizing dynamic warm-ups, static stretching before and after, making sure that muscles are taken care of, even if that means in our cool down, you've done some stretching, you've done light jogging, some dynamic movements, and then you jump in an ice bath. I played in Duluth, Minnesota, so sometimes we just jumped in the snowbank. You're going to monitor workload. Training intensities and how often are key. If you're doing a weight room activity in day 1, you don't want to do the same weight room activity in day 2. But you also may not want to be doing heavy dynamic scrum tackle practice on the same day you've done weightlifting. Making sure that you have recovery days is also key. I can tell you, you play a game on Saturday, you're going to be feeling it on Sunday. You definitely don't want to have a heavy hitting or scrum practice on Monday. And then periodization, making sure that you're doing a little bit of cross training, that there's up and down with what you're training with, and that it's implementing those intensities and recovery days. Hydration and nutrition are huge in a sport that's contact, where not only do you have the physicality of the contact, but you also have the running and the speed, the agility that has to be there. Making sure you're getting quality proteins, complex carbs, and healthy fats are all regular staples in the diet, and preventing dehydration. Anytime an athlete becomes dehydrated, that can lead to cramping, fatigue, and slower reaction times. The last thing you want is to be running down that field and lose all your momentum, and now you're getting tackled because of it. But if you're dehydrated or not getting a proper nutrition, that's exactly what can happen. So with World Rugby, this is our governing body institution internationally. Each country has their own. Here we have USA Rugby, but the protocols are the same internationally. And it's one of the reasons that to cover an international or sanctioned US match, you actually have to be part of the ICR, which is where you go through your certification and you are in their data bank. And You have gone through the training, and the training is, I want to say, about 20 hours of online courses, going through all the medical protocols, all of the rules, all of the regulations, and then going through all of the concussion staging, what to do on a game day match, how to recognize these things, what resources we have. And then you actually take a live didactic course where you go through scenarios, you do event planning, and then you have to take a practical exam. Now, the online courses have to be done every 2 years, and the practical exam does have to be done every 3rd year to stay in compliance. But once you're in compliance, it's uniform across countries. I've worked with other physicians in other countries that don't speak my language, but we can work on the same field and the same pitch and know exactly what our hand signals are and what the protocol is for injuries and especially concussion. USA Rugby, World Rugby is really big on trying to prevent concussion and future head injuries and recognizing these and keeping our players safe. And so we have the recognize and remove. Now, even if we recognize things, we remove you, we clear you, you can go back on. But if we recognize, we remove you, and we find any of the symptoms, we keep you out. And there's further workup that gets done. Part of this, of that recognize and remove, are knowing your red flags, knowing the obvious ones, you know, where we get that posturing on the field. They've gone down, they're not moving. We see the hit, but some of those signs you don't always see. And so it's making sure that we are paying attention to something that could have possibly caused a concussion, getting them off the field and following the protocol. Now, they do use the Scout and Scout 6 protocols for checking. Everybody has baselines in rugby when you play up at the higher levels, so collegiate and up, but they're actually starting to do it for the youth teams as well. And we're going through all this with the SCAT and the Scouts so that we can recognize these a little bit better, and we have baselines with us. But if there's any suspicion, we immediately remove them and evaluate them. So one of the things we use is the HIA off-field assessment that has 5 components. And so we utilize those criteria 1 indicators. And so that's going to be our red flags. We have an assessment of their IMG data, and that's the newer component to World Rugby. And then there's an off-field assessment tool. We, at the higher levels, have pitch side video, and then an attending doctor is always there to review this and review the patient. Big things that we utilize if no database is available. So if we don't have any baselines, we're going to kind of follow that SCAT and Scout protocols, and utilizing the Maddox score as well. And this is validated for sideline assessment and concussion at the time of concussion, but not serial testing. One of the biggest things that World Rugby has adapted and started to utilize is with the HIA, which is the head injury assessment, is the SCRM app. And this is used for any World Rugby sanctioned event, whether it be specifically here in the United States, or if you go over to Ghana or New Zealand, Australia, India, Japan, you're going to find that this app is utilized for all players, and it has the player information in there, all of their baseline screenings, what their history is, allergies, if they are in concussion protocol currently or not, if they've ever been in it and when. And so it's a huge asset that we utilize. So that's what I've got for you guys today. These are my references. If you look towards the bottom, you'll see something called passport.world.rugby. That is the World Rugby page. That is the resource that you can find 99% of what you need when you are being a sideline medic, sideline provider, or even just watching the game to get a better understanding. But it is a world of knowledge there. You can register with them. They have courses all the time to become certified. So if you're thinking of covering events, I definitely recommend it. If you cover any kind of event, I definitely recommend it. It is an all-encompassing, not just rugby-specific course. And that right there is my national championship team from college. When we played, that was our state pick that got us to it. So, and that's me. I was one of our kickers. me showing off my kicking skills there, but I appreciate you guys' time. Let's see, bring this back up. All right.
Hello. All right. Awesome. The first question here is coming from Rick, and he asks, are mouth guards required? And what are the rules and potential penalties regarding mouth guards?
Yes. So it's one of the things when the refs come to check your cleats right before start a game, they're going to check that you have a mouth guard. You have to have a mouth guard in place. We cannot use the football ones that have like the outer part or the string attached. They've got to be an inner one. I mean, it's as simple as you go to Walgreens, you get one, put it in a hot cup of water and form it to your mouth, but you do have to have one in. Like I said, now World Rugby at the professional level is having them all made with sensors in them. So every international match now will have those.
Very good. Well, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to post them into either the question box or the chat. We've got some good attendees here. I can see we had an athlete trainer who moved from the area out, and as well as Susan Kane, who's right up the street from us over at Bond Clinic. She's an athlete trainer and physical therapist. So lots of good attendees. And hopefully that worked out nice for everyone to get to do this over your lunch hour. Well, yes, if you happen to have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at the Journal Club at Releve Sports Medicine. We can get that question passed along to Dr. Holseth. And thank you to everyone for attending today. Any last comments before we conclude today, Dr. Holseth?
Nope, just if you ever get a chance, take a watch of rugby. You'll be completely confused the first few times, but it is a lot of fun to watch.
Fabulous. Well, thank you everyone for coming today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.